Welcome to the Mental Fitness Podcast. Today's entrepreneurs are mental athletes that have to know about the mind and how to keep it fit. Our goal is to increase our resilience against stress and anxiety, optimize our productivity, motivation, and optimism by learning about the human mind through psychology, neuroscience, and human behavior. I'm your host Ozan. I'm a founder who has experienced the challenges of launching and growing a business and a keen student of human behavior over the last 15 years. I'll share with you what I know and learn. Hundreds of impactful, behavior-changing ideas are waiting to be discovered by us. Let's begin now. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Mental Fitness Podcast for Entrepreneurs. I'm your host Ozan, and today's topic is the imposter syndrome. I think this is quite a funny one. Have you ever felt like an imposter in any situation? Is this something that you've experienced? For me, I have had the fortune of experiencing it in quite an interesting situation. It was the first time, I think. I was invited up to a stage of 4,000 people where I was to give a talk on something. And there, the people that went before me were celebrities known from TV and all that. And I was among those people, and I was cheered up onto the stage and did something and told about my experiences, etc. It went well. I wasn't too nervous because I do have some experience with speaking engagements and addressing crowds and so on. But I definitely remember feeling like an imposter, at least having a shadow of that feeling, and that is particularly because there is such a contrast between your daily experience, your daily very ordinary moments, and what you experience when people treat you in a different way, because you are not a star, you are not a celebrity, and you are among those kind of people, so you automatically get that treatment, which is quite ironic because you're a part of the event, you are treated like that, and what you does have, of course, certain value, but that is nowhere near to your daily experience. So because of that huge contrast between how people treat you, how people serve you, how people try to help you, running circles around you, so that's kind of a different experience. And then you immediately think, like, what's going on here? Should I actually behave in a different way? Should I behave exactly like I am? And then how people see you actually becomes a huge part of your identity. And people who don't have a psychology background really don't get this. But we live for the connections we have with other humans, and our perception of reality is not as concrete as you might think. It's more fluid. It's almost like a liquid, I would say, and because of that, we constantly seek confirmation from our surroundings, and particularly from other people that are around us, for confirmation of the realities that we're experiencing. And one of those realities is, as part of our internal conversation, is who we are. So if other people see you as an incredible athlete or incredible musician or someone who is exceptionally funny, then you are more likely to think about yourself in that light. Or the opposite is also true. If you see yourself as a very successful entrepreneur, like the second the child of Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Bill Gates at the same time. So if you're seeing like yourself as the impossible next prodigy, but everybody around you is thinking quite the opposite, then you are less likely to think like that. So I think what people see and feel about us really shapes the way how we think about ourselves. We are particularly vulnerable to that because we are pack animals. And because of this, if people see you in a very positive life, let's say a month ago or like a year ago, you were in your room, had absolutely no idea about what you were doing, and a year from now, you are managing a team of 7 people, you have funding for your startup, and people look up to you and ask for direction about what to do, and like the contrast again. It goes back to the idea of contrast. You know the contrast, the difference between your experience a year ago and that in that moment, and you can clearly see the distinction, what other people can't. So because you know something they don't know, you feel like an imposter. You feel like you're hiding something from them. The official definition of the imposter syndrome, it is defined as a psychological pattern in which an individual doubts their skills, talents, or accomplishments, and has a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. So I think it makes a lot of sense to take a sidestep here and go into a tangent to just discuss an idea. And this is the idea of the difference between what a syndrome is versus what the actual feeling of that. So is something else to feel like an imposter, is something as opposed to having imposter syndrome. If you think of it on a sliding scale, being at the syndrome edge is like the absolute extreme end of that scale. You might not be on the absolute edge of that scale, so you might not have an imposter syndrome, but you might feel like an imposter from time to time, which I think is an important distinction. And the book it's a book by Ichiro Kishimi, and the book's name is The Courage to be Disliked. It's a fantastic book. I mean, I really fell in love with that book because it goes back, it's structured in such a beautiful way. First of all, it's about Adlerian psychology, but the conversation is structured in such a way, the author is having a conversation with a mentor who was also receiving a type of mentorship from the founder of the Adlerian psychology himself. So there's kind of like that interesting one-on-one chat type of a structure. But other than that, in terms of the relation to our topic, what the author talks about in that book is the feeling of inferiority is actually a very valuable feeling. And think about this. When you feel inferior, and children start feeling inferior about a lot of things. I mean, they're not that tall, they cannot reach the upper cupboard, they're not strong enough to open a jar, they cannot jump that far, they cannot speak that eloquently. So there are a lot of things that they feel inferior, and this is a feeling that persists through childhood, and that's why children want to become adults. But what they do is not sweep that feeling under the rug, but they actually accept that they are inferior, and the fact that they're inferior is not something that is to be ashamed of. It's just a natural part of life, because if for there to be the possibility of growth, there needs to be a difference in the first place. And of course, this does not mean inferiority as the value of the human being. That's not something that's comparable. And I think that we are at an universal standard at that. I mean, each person is as valuable as the other, regardless of any dimensions such as age, race, and so on. But we have different skills, and we might be good or bad, or better or worse in those skills. And we have some strengths as well. So the definition, going back to Ichiro Kishimi's and Adlerian psychology's way of looking at it, is that you might feel inferior in some situations, but if that feeling of inferiority is not resolved, if you do not show any growth, and if you turn your back on the idea of growing and improving yourself, and if you're feeling particularly vulnerable because of that, then it turns into a syndrome. So while it's okay to feel like an imposter from time to time as an entrepreneur, it does not mean that you have imposter syndrome, and I think this distinction is particularly important because it's the very edge of that scale. And what this there's a very functional benefit to differentiating the terminology and the lexicon around this, and it's that it allows us to talk about this, right? It allows us to talk about the fact that we are feeling like imposters in certain situations, even if we do not have the imposter syndrome. So it makes it much more approachable, much more talkable, and much more of a shared experience that we can talk about. I think another particular important aspect of the imposter syndrome and how entrepreneurs experience is how we deal with our sense of not knowing, because there are a lot of things that we do not know. There are more things that we don't know than things we do know, and this is a particularly striking example because of I have been again really going deep into Ray Dalio's arguments and structure of thinking about this. And if you have not already, I would strongly recommend you watch How the Economic Machine Works by Ray Dalio. Again, his principles, and start reading his LinkedIn How the World Works, the Changing World Order series. It's definitely good content. And the idea there is entrepreneurial success, as he defines, comes down to one thing: being successful in the business, not just entrepreneurial, but being successful in any business as an individual. It comes down to dealing well with the fact that you don't know everything. It comes down to the fact that you should be okay. You should be able to tolerate that you don't know, because if you stick with the things you know, it means you're in your comfort zone. And for you to be out of your comfort zone automatically means there are more things that you don't know. There are a lot of uncertainties that you have no idea about. It means that is what being out of your comfort zone means. And that's the particular reason. The longer you can remain outside of that comfort zone, the longer you can tolerate the pain of not knowing. And there's a pain that comes with it, and that pain is very real. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're nearing the end of your runway, which means money is running out, and you have to figure out a product market fit, or if you're struggling paying your basic expenses. So if you're feeling that, then it is. There's nothing more natural in the world than going back and thinking to yourself, how am I gonna get myself out of this hole that I have dug, and you feel that inferiority, that you feel that you don't know how to do things. And at the very same day, you might be having a conversation with another person who will see the title on your business card or on your LinkedIn profile and see your accomplishments, and be talking to you like it's incredible what you have accomplished. So you'll politely nod and maybe perhaps say thank you and so on. But again, this goes back to the idea of contrast, the contrast of what you felt a moment ago versus what other people perceive you like. And when that contrast is big, bigger the imposter feeling. Okay, how do we deal with this? Is there anything that we can do? Are there any tools that we can use to deal with this? And I think yes. I think there are a couple of ways of looking at it that should help. First of all, one of them is definitely, for a fact, realizing that we are not static beings and we are all in a journey of growth. So while you might feel you are a 3 out of 10 in a particular skill, it doesn't mean that you're going to remain a 3 out of 10. As long as you remain in that zone of not knowing and tolerating the pain of that uncertainty, then it's going to be a 4 out of 10. Then it's going to be a 6 out of 10. Then it's going to be one day a 9 out of 10. So it is a journey. I think the first thing to remind ourselves is that for any skill, for understanding the market, for managing people, for finding product market fit, for finding the right customer problems to focus on, for everything, or for managing large deals, or managing customer complaints and so on. It's a growth scale, and then you might not be on the very best end of that scale, but it's a journey. I think that's the first lesson. The second one, as I said, the contrast comes from what you feel internally versus what you are perceived like externally. So, of course, naturally thinking and looking at it as a mathematical thing, there are two ways to actually diminish that contrast, to resolve that contrast. And it is either by increasing the level of competence you feel internally, or decreasing the amount of value, the amount of importance you ascribe to others what others are telling about you. And I think you have to do both, right? You have to do both. It's just like being a Instagram or a TikTok celebrity in a way. There are going to be comments because it's just how the spectrum goes. There are going to be people who are just fans of you. They just adore you. They just go crazy about anything that you do, even if the content you put out there is really bad. They will look at it and feel like, oh, this is actually incredible, because they're just so much in love with you. And of course, there's another aspect. There is like the flip side of that graph, and there are people who just hate you to bits. So if you pay attention to these haters and lovers too much, then that's actually gonna scoop your understanding of yourself. It's quite difficult. So the only solution is that, yes, take a look at that, but do not ascribe that big of a value to what people say and think. I mean, get the feedback. If there is value, if there's learning value, definitely listen to it, but just don't go to too much of a high when people say something positive, which will in turn protect you from going into a too much of a low when people say something negative. And I think that's one way to bridge that gap as well. And the final thing, it makes sense to look at successful people and look at their history of how novice they were when they began. Like, everybody has to start somewhere, and nobody starts out as an expert. So take a look at the people, at some people around you that you think are experts, that you think are particularly good at a few things, and try to look to their past. Did they start off as an expert? I don't think so. So as soon as you realize, even the best people that you see around yourself came to that point as a result of time, hard work, effort, and were not always at that level, I think it will actually ease the fact that you should not feel like an imposter. So that's all I have on this topic. I hope these last three tips are useful for you, and hope you can incorporate them into your life. And yeah, this is, I think, an important topic, the understanding what imposter is, the edges of that spectrum, and navigating your way around that. Thank you very much for tuning in. Hope this is useful to you. As always, we'll talk to you in the next episode, and take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.